Hi, YouTube world, and hi, Rally Out. Hi, it's Tina. I just am fresh from our event at the Folensby Community House where we had hot chocolate and lots of yummy goodies. Um, and we made a little bit of money and we had a real good time talking with a lot of people. So it was really a lot of fun. Perhaps you can make it next time. Um, the next event that we have coming up is the Breakfast with the Judge, I believe, and that's will only be available for the Angel Roll people. So if you're not on the Angel Roll yet, contact Rhonda at A Child Plays CASA and get started on that. In the meantime, we are going to talk about today. We want to thank Trinity Health Systems for being our sponsor for today. They have always come to the front when we ask them for help. So that's pretty cool. And now, as we go on, I gotta switch over here. There we go. I knew that was supposed to do that. All right, now we can switch over. There we go. Show CASA love. Today is Sunday, February 9th. It is the eve of our official 25th anniversary. We started on February 10th, 2025. That's when our first volunteers were sworn in, and that's when our first CASAs were assigned. The volunteers were assigned to the kids. So, yay, tomorrow's our 25th. Of course, as you know, we're going to be celebrating the whole year. Anyway, let's get on and let's look back. We're going to start with the year 2008. Do you remember the year 2008? The world was supposed to come to an end because of the CERN particle accelerator. They were going to try to create a black hole by putting two particles and smashing them into each other. I don't know if they made the black hole. I do know the world didn't end that day. Spotify began in 2008, as did Android. And I remember the very first Android commercials going, what the heck is that? I didn't realize they were talking about it was a completely new language for phones. Just like the iPhones have the I language, this was going to be a different Android language. And it was what they call free source, which means if you were making apps, you had access to all of their backdrops so you could make it easily. 2008 was the first Marvel multiverse, and that's the series that we're on even to today. It started with Iron Man 1. Of course, they didn't call it that then. They called it Iron Man. Breaking Bad also came out in that year. And The Dark Knight. Yeah, things were a little bit dark in 2008, huh? WALL-E. Yeah, WALL-E was dark in a different way. I mean, the future that WALL-E showed was not very nice, but WALL-E brought a light of sunshine. Michael Phelps became a household name, as did Usain Bolt from the Olympics that year. What was happening in National CASA? Well, they had just served their 2 millionth child. So that's very exciting for them. They had a number of different smaller CASAs. I think they had about 900 at that point. A Child Space CASA was also growing. They were growing volunteers. We have had over 200 people who have volunteered with CASA in a number of different roles. For a while there was baking. We were doing bake sales every month. We had people working in construction. We've had people helping with the mailing. Twice a year we send out an old-fashioned mailing with the newsletter to let people know what's going on with CASA. Fundraising. We've had a lot of people help out with the fundraising, and it's one of those things that I wish we didn't have to do, but we do. So we might as well have a good time doing it. And other events that we've had in this one was a picture, there was Breakfast with Santa, and you could see some of the volunteers there helping the younger kids to make various projects, and of course our court volunteers. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the court volunteer does, but first We're going to talk about the year 2009. 2009 had some interesting points. We got our first black president, and Michael Jackson died. Avatar was one of the top movies. Up had just come out, and that was the first Disney Pixar movie. Southland came out of TV, and The Middle had just started. I don't know if you've seen The Middle. It kind of was a very funny sitcom. And Steelers won the last Super Bowl. So the Steelers were winning, but we're going to stop now and look at how what a volunteer does. All right. So basically, what happens is this: a child gets put into foster care, or has reason to think he may be entering foster care, and so the judge appoints a CASA volunteer to take care of the case. And that CASA volunteer gets to know the children, gets to know the parents, the grandparents, the foster parents, the adoptive parents, everybody involved in the case. Sometimes the teachers, sometimes the doctors, whoever's involved in the child's case, the CASA volunteer gets to know. They set up a regular meeting with the foster child, or whatever child it is. Some of them aren't in foster care, but they're not in their parents' care either. So the volunteer still sets up some meeting time with them. The neat thing about being a volunteer is that you don't have to go meet with your child from 9 to 5. A caseworker, by law, can only meet with the child from between 9 and 5, and they can't meet with them at school without the parents' permission. A CASA volunteer can, because they're appointed by the court. The CASA volunteer will then communicate with everyone involved in the case, at which point she will sit down and type up a report. And she will send that report to the judge and to the other members of the case that are working on the case, the other lawyers that are involved. And basically, the report just says, well, you know, I talked to Mom and she said this, and I talked to Dad and he said this, and when I visited the child, this is what I saw happening, and those kind of things. And the child wants, because we want to give that child a voice, so here's what the child would like to see. And then at the very last line, they're allowed to put what they think is in the best interest of the child. But of course, they don't make the decision. That's up to the judge. The CASA volunteer also helps support the child through the various transitions. Oftentimes, kids that go into foster care don't go to one home. They might go to 2, 3, 4, up to 10, 15 homes, depending on how long they're there. And the CASA volunteer is there through every step. Also, caseworkers change. Depending on how each county is set up, some counties, they assign the child to a caseworker, and that's the caseworker they stay with. Some counties, they set it up so that there's an intake caseworker, and then an ongoing caseworker, and then after the parents' rights are terminated, there's another caseworker that's working with them. So that can be very confusing for a child, because they don't know who to go to for answers. And then, of course, the CASA volunteer keeps working to find the child a permanent home. And again, that's with the team. They're not responsible to find the home themselves. All right, skipping back to the year 2010. Let's see, what was happening that year? The Deepwater Horizon disaster. That's the oil spill, and that's when the rig blew up. As you can see, that cost a lot of money. It's also the year that silly bands come out. And now that I see the silly bands, I remember exactly the age of each of my kids, because they had to have those dang silly bands. They cost pennies to make. They sold them for dollars. And the more you had, it was a status symbol. The iPad came out that year. It was Wi-Fi only. It didn't have data like a phone does. It was Wi-Fi only, but that did give you the access to the internet. WikiLeaks started this year as well, in 2010, which is kind of an interesting thing to look into too. And Apple came out with FaceTime. And the reason I put that one in specifically is because even though this is 2010, we know, having come from the future, in 2020, we're going to find uh, different applications taking over where we do our meetings. In fact, Zoom becomes the biggest application for that. And it's interesting because FaceTime was already here, Skype was already here, and yet neither one of those in 2020 became the thing. Inception was a very interesting, very dark kind of a movie, but that was one of the number one movies of the year. And The Mad Hatter was another one of the, I'm sorry, Alice in Wonderland with Johnny Depp as the Mad Hatter. That was another one of the very popular movies that year. The Walking Dead started, and boy, did that take over. And Sherlock. If you haven't seen Sherlock by BBC, go watch it. It is incredible writing. They are really, really well done. Speaking of the internet, there are almost 207 million active websites. Because now that we all had not dial-up internet, we all had regular, what we now consider regular internet, we started to put our own websites up. And I know that I, for one, had a website to kind of just show what my family was doing. I didn't do it on Facebook. I just put a whole website out there, and it was kind of fun. My first website was kind of fun, at least for me, and it was fun to keep track of what the kids were doing. We have a website too. It's www.Child's Place CASA. There is no just starts with childsplacecasa.com. All right, where do we get the CASA volunteers that do the court volunteering? Well, they have come from fairs and events. That is our number one, that's our number 2 way that we get the word out about CASA. That's the number 2 way. We'll get to the number 1 in a minute. Social media has brought us a number of volunteers. Our campaigns, we did an I Am for the Child campaign a while back, where we got everybody we ran into to hold the I Am for the Child sign, and then we posted it on social media. Billboards and signs. We sometimes have money specially dedicated and donated to us specifically for the purpose of advertising, and so we can afford to get a billboard or sign, or even occasionally a commercial. We also get a lot from the local news. A lot of people see us in the Herald Star, and since we've been in the Herald Star now for the last 25 years, people are starting to recognize the name of Child's Place CASA and go, yeah, don't they do something with kids? Yes, they definitely do. But the number 1 way we get volunteers is word of mouth. And that means you. When you tell your friends, when you invite others to check into it, CASA becomes more well known and is better able to get more volunteers. Our volunteers are both men and women. They have every diversity. They must be 21 years and older, and at this point I think ours go up to 84 is our oldest volunteer right now. I think it may be the oldest volunteer that we've had. I don't know if she's still active. I'll have to look into that. They need to be law-abiding citizens. You will be asked to get a record check. You'll be checked with both the police and with the children's services of your county. They are just average people with above average hearts. These are people that care and go the extra mile. Our volunteers are absolutely wonderful people. They are the reason that CASA can operate like it does. All right, let's go on to the next year, 2011. Occupy Wall Street. That was an interesting political movement. And it would be interesting to find out how much that movement eventually cost New York. Because my understanding is when the people that were occupying Wall Street, like basically they just like sat in for months at a time. When they left, they didn't clean up behind themselves. And so that costs the city of New York to take care of that. Um, Justice has been done, says the Washington Post. U.S. forces kill Obama bin Laden. Twitch was invented in 2011. Snapchat was invented in 2011. And Microsoft bought Skype. And I think that's the reason that Skype did not become as popular as Zoom. But we'll get there in about 10 years. The royal wedding with over, I wrote $2 billion. No, it was 2 billion people watching. 2 billion people turned in to watch this fairy tale wedding. It was wonderful. Harry Potter's last movie comes out. Deathly Hallows Part 2. Hugo was a very interesting movie that came out that year also. And Drive was a thrilling movie, a thrill ride of a movie, as it says there. I didn't see that one. I'm really not into thrill movies, but I heard it was very good. Planking becomes popular. What is planking? Well, it's just laying flat in different places. As you can see, all ages were into the planking. Let's talk a little bit more about the volunteers. What do having CASA volunteers, what have studies showed, what it does for the kids? Well, number one, they spend less time in out-of-home placements. That means in foster care, it means maybe with their grandmother or their great aunt or whomever. When they have a volunteer, they spend shorter time trying to figure out what happens next. They also are less likely to come back in to foster care once they've been discharged. So whatever permanency is found for them stays permanent and is way more likely to stay permanent. They also, as it turns out, were more likely to be reunified with their family. And that's great because that's where the kids, for the most part, want to be. They want to be back with mom and dad. That's their mom and dad. Regardless of how we think of them, the kids think they're wonderful, and that's where they want to be. They were also more likely to enter a permanent placement and not just stay in foster care forever and ever and ever until they age out. That is one of the things that we're trying to avoid, is to have the kids graduate from foster care. Kathy Lawrence was a CASA volunteer, and she had this to say: it's so rewarding. It's just about time and patience. You have to go through this with managed expectations. We are just here to help kids move on to the next phase of their lives. If my kiddo takes one little thing, and it helps him to be successful, I will have done my job. And that's kind of what a lot of the volunteers report back, is that it's so rewarding because they're making a difference, even if it's a tiny one, in the child's life that will go on to make the child more successful. Now that we've heard the words of a volunteer, I wanted to put the words of a child. Now, just so you know, this is not the child reading this. A CASA child who had a CASA volunteer wrote this, and I have somebody else reading it, but I think it's a really telling thing, and this was from last year, so bear with us.
I was 7 years old the first time I was taken from my home. Foster homes came and went, schools were here and there, caseworkers drifted in and out of my life. After 6 years of placement, the court appointed Pat. Pat came to see me quite often and called me when she couldn't come in person. She worked with my lawyers to appeal the court's decision. She got me visits with my old foster family, made sure I was seeing my therapist regularly, and checked with my teachers to make sure I was managing in school. She bought me newspaper clippings of youth who made it through hard times and of students who were able to get scholarships to cover their education. I never had someone stand up for me like she did. She stood before the judges, the lawyers, my mother, and the caseworkers, and wasn't swayed by their opinions. It completely amazed me. I trusted her more with each visit. She became not only an advocate, but a friend. Earlier this year, I testified to a legislative committee on behalf of the CASA program. At the end of the testimony, I said, to give a child a CASA is to give them a voice. To give them a voice is to give them hope. And to give them hope is to give them the world. As a child who was assigned to CASA years ago, I believe that with all my heart.
Now it's your turn to make a difference. We're going to talk again about donating. You can donate online at go.rallyup.com/show CASA Love 2025. You can donate at our website, www.childsplacecasa.com, or you can just donate directly to you can just send a track directly to CASA Building in Folensby. You can find out more about becoming a volunteer by contacting Rhonda Stubbs. And I'm sorry, Rhonda, I didn't mean to do that to your name, and I forgot to fix this one. It's 304-737-4444, or you can email childsplacecasa@comcast.net. And let's switch back over to the big screen. There we go. I'm back. All right, guys. You can tell I get a little bit caught up into the what happened back when. For me, it's a wonderful trip down memory lane. I'm hoping you're having as much fun with watching it as I am with presenting it. I'm going to end this now because we are like really running over in time. But I want to encourage you to meet me back here tomorrow at 4:30. And we are going to talk, that will be the actual day of our 25th anniversary. So it will be the time. And we're going to talk a little bit about judges and how they play into the whole thing. So meet us back here, and I will talk with you later. Bye-bye.